You're listening to The Sports Memory, part of the Sports Moments and Memories podcast with Craig Olson. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a sports memory. One of our sponsors is Pemberton Law Firm. They serve you from locations in Fergus Falls, Wadena, Alexandria, Detroit Lakes, and online at pemlaw.com. Pemberton Law carries a legacy of trustworthy and reputable legal representation dating back to 1883. Also making this podcast possible is Lake Area Docks and Lifts. They offer premium waterfront equipment sales, service, and installation. Best quality and service at the best prices. Just ask your neighbor at the lake. That's Lake Area Docks and Lifts.
Under Wayne Horgan, the Fergus Falls boys hockey program proved that they had arrived as a team to be contended with in Region 8. That opened the door for Bill Colpitts to come in to serve as head coach for 2 seasons.
When I came to Fergus, I had taken over from Mr. Horgan, and Mr. Horgan had really developed a culture on the team, and I give him a lot of credit. I was a first-year guy that didn't know anything, but Mr. Horgan had set the standard and the culture and the dedication the players had, and I just really felt comfortable in Fergus because my first year there I didn't have a teaching job. Which didn't make my wife very happy because I had come there for the hockey coaching salary and substitute teaching, but that was really a growing experience for me because I did a lot of substitute teaching out at people for handicapped, the hospital they had out there.
Yep.
And then I would go and substitute teach in the high school, and a lot of times, kids might, in a normal school, might be picking on kids that were a little bit different or slow, but in Fergus, the kids there, because their parents had worked with the kids with disabilities, they always sat with them at lunch and visited with them and everything, and I said, boy, this is really, really classy kids, and So I guess that's what made my days in Fergus really rewarding, is based on what Mr. Horgan had established and the kids that I got to work with. It was really a treat for me.
His first year saw a lot of close games, so many, in fact, that they became known as the Overtime Otters. Vic Evavold was the offensive leader on that team.
Well, our first year we had a lot of overtime games and close games. We switched offenses when he came in. I played as a sophomore for Wayne Horgan, so we had a whole different breakout and forecheck. So when he came in, we switched that. So we had a lot of close games, and it was a rough start. So we came in and we actually switched back to our normal forecheck and breakout halfway through the season, and we started winning. And there were a lot of close games, but we pulled them out, yeah.
Yeah, and I think your senior year, you were like 14-7, had a very good year. You were the Anderson Lake MVP that year. You remember, who were you playing with at that time? Who's on your line? Because you centered.
Well, I centered Scott Steinbach and Craig Hedstrom to start the season, and then it ended with Mike Donnelly and Brad Bagel.
Hey, some pretty good names.
Yeah, some pretty good
history.
names, yep.
Yeah. So tell us about your game, Vic. As a center out there, of course, you make things happen for everybody on your line, but how would you describe your style as a player?
My style was speed-driven. I was a pretty good skater, so I roamed the ice pretty well, and it was a lot of fun. Usually the wingers got me the puck, and I brought it in and set it up and tried to get the offense rolling. So it was a lot of fun, actually.
Did you come up through the ranks, through all the youth programs?
I did. I started playing youth hockey, maybe second grade. Went to Squirts, and then we went traveling. I started in 4th grade, I think it was, Squirt A's, Pee Wee A's, Bantam A's, and then went to high school as a sophomore.
You know, I know from over the years talking to hockey families, you know, the travel in youth tournaments all over, and when you're growing up, you're on the road all the time, you're on the road on weekends, and it's kind of almost a letdown when you get to high school as far as the number of games you play. And,
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's quite an adjustment, isn't it?
It is. Back then, we would stay with families in Thief River, Roseau, Bemidji, and you got to know the families. So when they came to Fergus, they'd stay with your family, and you'd go up there and stay with theirs, and it became quite a relationship. Some of those relationships still go on because we know these people. Tim Berglund, for example, coach of Thief River. Well, yeah, I mean, we see each other now, and it's, hey, Tim, hey, Vic, you know. So those are built through youth hockey and growing up. So going to high school, yeah, it was. You played 20 games instead of 40 or 45 games.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah.
I remember our first Squirt A hockey team, we won one game. One game.
Wow.
And that same team as a Bantams, I think we're 26 and 13 or
Yeah.
something. So Otter hockey improved.
Yeah, no doubt. I imagine you played for some pretty familiar names too in those youth programs. A lot of guys, you know, I think of when I came to town, and some of the guys that were coaching were, you know, Dick Werner and
Oh, yes.
guys like that. who-
Dennis Eckelberg, Lloyd Shakestead, Gary Cranston, you know, lots of those guys. Those guys got Fergus hockey going.
Yeah.
And what, you know, sometimes gets forgotten is that we only had one employee at the rink, and it was Lloyd Shakestead. Everything else was volunteer. So parents and kids volunteered a lot of their time, making ice, sweeping the floors, cleaning the locker rooms. So it was a big time commitment for families back then. But it was fun. What else are you going to do?
Right, in the winter in Minnesota.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You know, you were in the toughest section, I think, in the state. I mean, getting out of Section 8 and getting
Yeah.
down to state it was like a mini state tournament. There's so tough
Yep.
competition there.
Great competition. I think looking back, you know, that back then they had two different. You had different sections. Section 7, 8, right? We were Section 8.
Yep.
But you also had first team, second team, and an honorable mention. I remember my senior year, first team had 5 players on it, and all 5 of them went Division I. You know, that's pretty good group. Second
say.
team, you know, I think everybody who made second team back then, they all went on to play college hockey. So, you know, and our senior year in '82, our 5 defensemen all went on to play college hockey, 2 Division I. So that's some decent hockey for that early in the development of Fergus hockey.
Well, we got off to a very slow start. If you want to say 3-12 is a slow start, but our kids put everything together by the end of the year, and it was just LTD, living the dream. You know, they just would never quit, and they hadn't had much success in youth hockey, but we had a bunch of seniors, and this was their last shot at high school, and they were going to make memories that would last a lifetime, and I'm sure they did, because as you said, they set records for overtime wins, and they just never quit.
Well, and in a close game, to keep it close, you need a good goalie, and Jay Drexel was your MVP that year. What do you remember about Jay?
Jay was really the backbone of our team, and he was kind of a nervous kind of guy. In the dressing room, sometimes he'd get kind of over anxious, and he even might have to take a paper bag and blow in that to kind of calm himself down a little bit at times. But he won so many games for us, and he was the difference in a lot of them.
Oh, you had some solid defensemen too, didn't you?
I was in love with our defense. We had the 2 seniors, Nygaard and Lillemon, and Dan Snewstad and Lundin, who was a young player but could really move the puck. And so we were very, very more confident about our defense, than maybe our offense at times was a little spotty, but we always seemed to get one when we needed it.
Well, Vic Evavold was your leading scorer both years that you were with the Otters, and Vic was one of those forwards that just, he seemed to have a knack for scoring.
Well, he had a touch, and he was a big, strong kid. That he could overpower the defenses and get around people and fight through checks. And he had a good shot, and he was just very key for us. And of course, he had some good line mates too that helped him along, but he was really the key to our offense.
And was there a tougher player than Tom Mann?
If it was a kid named Jesse Wentler, and we played both of them at the same time together, and that was a line that we'd put out against anybody in Region 8. I mean, they were really tough, along with Samuelson.
And Tom Mann also was an aggressive player.
I would say I was a very aggressive, physically aggressive, hard-nosed player. And I'm sure enough people would probably tell you sometimes to my detriment, probably. I have a very fond memory of, I don't remember if it was my junior or senior year, still playing out at Fairgrounds, obviously. And Fran Canito was in the penalty box. And I had got a penalty and, got out of there. 2 or 3 shifts later, scored. And then, like the next shift, I got another penalty. And I just keeps ringing in my head, right? And he always called me Mano. Mano, we got to have you out there. You can't be sitting in here. You can't come visit me twice a game. We got to have you out there. So I remember that. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, I would say I was a physical, hard-nosed player.
And your teams those years, I remember in what I heard about your first 2 years, and I saw you play your last year, the whole season, but you had some pretty good goaltenders back then.
Yes, my sophomore year, so when my brother was a senior, Steve Hedstrom was the goalie, or excuse me, that's his older brother, Mark Hedstrom, was the goalie. He was I thought very good. I believe played up in Concordia when he was done, and then our senior year, of course, Russ Pastor, very kind of an undersized. Well, a lot of the goalies were undersized at that time. Very run your angles and super quick. Plus, he was left-handed, right? So he's doing this deal, and everybody's thinking they're gonna, beat him glove side or whatever, and it's like they look up and he's backwards, right? And it's like, oh, so, but super quick. Jay Drexel was the goalie our junior year. Mm-hmm. Amazing speed and flexibility. I mean, his reflexes were otherworldly sometimes. It was crazy. I do remember probably about halfway through my junior year, he kind of figured out that he might need glasses, because if people shot the puck from outside the blue line, he wouldn't pick it up until it was like right on him. And it's like, can't imagine being a goalie and not being able to trust your eyes quite that well when your job is literally to get in the way of the puck however you can, right? If you're trying to block a shot, it's like, I hope it really doesn't hit me, right? Because it hurts. And their job is just to get whatever part of their body in front of the puck at any time. So, yeah, I would say all 3 years we had very good goaltending.
One thing I do remember about the Bill Colpitts years, played a lot of close games. In fact, I believe you were nicknamed in one of the years Billy Colpitts and the Overtime Otters, because there were so many overtime games.
I think you came up with that.
I think
if I remember correctly, and listening to your radio show, yeah, I would say that was probably you. Yeah.
Okay, you're probably right. I'll claim that. But you were involved in a lot of close games and won your share of them.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree with that. Yeah, it was a very tough conference, right? We were still in, I shouldn't say conference even, Section 8, right? So you've got, Roseau, Warroad, Thief River Falls was always tight. Bemidji was always tight. East Grand Forks, I remember splitting with them, and we barely lost there, and then we kind of barely won in Fergus. We outshot them and whatever else, right? But yeah, I mean, the only games that really jump out that were probably handily won on our part were probably when we're playing a Fargo team or maybe in Alexandria or whatever. At that time, Moorhead in a little bit, but everybody else we were playing, Warroad, Thief River Falls, Crookston was always tough. Yeah, it was a very good section.
You know, when I came to Fergus, I read a lot of books and I watched the Europeans and everything, and I said, okay, we're going to do this European style and everything. And I couldn't explain it, and the kids didn't understand what I was talking about. And, you know, about halfway through the year, when I was looking at my team, I said, you know, we're not very good at passing the puck. We're not very good at handling the puck. And so, you know, we went back to the basics like stationary passing and individual skills. And we worked on that and worked on that. And as the more we worked on that, the more confidence our kids got. And I grew up wanting to play a defensive style rather than high scoring. And we really didn't have the offensive talent to play a wide open game. So, yeah, I guess you could say we kind of stressed the defense and let's shut them down, and then we don't have to score as many.
What would you say is your number one highlight as a player, as an Otter?
I think it was making the team. Being an Otter hockey player, in my era anyway, meant that you were a good hockey player. If you played on that team, you could skate, you could play the game. And I think that's the biggest memory. And the friendships, because it's all about friendships and camaraderie and building a team. And those values you learn, boy, you carry them for life. My
first year team in youth leagues hadn't had much success. But my second year team, they had won the Bantam title in the state. And the expectations of the Fergus people was sky high. And, you know, it's tough to win in Region 8 with sophomores. Mm-hmm. And, you know, juniors and seniors are who win it for you. And in spite of that, we had a lot of this young talent that not only did they have success out of the chute, but as juniors and seniors, they had great records at Fergus when they played for Mr. Cullen.
After the 2 years Bill Colpitts led the Otters, the 7-year reign of Tim Cullen was about to begin. Defensemen Kris and Kurk Werner played for both Colpitts and Cullen and talked about the difference in coaching styles.
Billy's pretty quiet, really knew his stuff. He was a good, but was not, much quieter, than Tim. Much.
Yeah, he knew his hockey.
Yeah, he did.
He was on
from Winnipeg. Played up in North Dakota.
I think he was on that 59. I think he's 60. He got out of there, but he might have been on that championship team. Mm-hmm. But he was good.
Yeah, he knew his stuff, and we had a pretty good year that year.
Yeah. And, lost at the end of Bemidji.
Yeah.
Just kind of one of those games up in Thief River.
Just got in a hole right away, got down. And
it's kind of a step up going to Bantams to that.
Yeah.
I remember harder competitive practices. He ran pretty hard practices. Just a lot of skating and.
I remember when Tim came, remember they were hard. That first week.
Yeah.
It was very, very difficult. It was really.
With Cullen?
Yeah, it was real.
Yeah.
Those were difficult practices. You practice at 3:30 every day. Before I could drive, you had to take your sticks to school and put them in your locker.
Yeah, and get rides
you
out.
had to come in and you had to fit in there all right, but then when you were able to drive, but everybody would pile into vehicles right on the hill out here.
Yeah.
And then we'd all go out to the rink. About 3:30, 4 they started.
Yeah.
You was dressed in the locker rooms back then. 1 and 2 were the high school rooms. Coaches were down in 4, and then you just have to go down and see them down there. But 2 locker rooms. We were always in 2. I was always over in 2. Then everybody before the game started, everybody would walk out and then go into 1.
Yeah.
And that's where we'd meet.
Yeah.
Everybody had all their stuff in there. And
weren't the biggest. I mean, they were
all right,
decent though, but kind of small.
Mm-hmm. They always smelled good.
And, the showers right, and then one of the 2 guys, either Christofferson or Steve Hedstrom, once in a while would come in with Zamboni snow with a scoop shovel off that would run in there and toss it.
You wouldn't think it would be, it was just freezing.
It would just, if you even got a little speck on you, he just jumped, and let alone the guy that got hit with the whole load of it. Oh, but yeah, those that's where we dressed, and about 3:00, the B team would come out at 5:30 or so. But Tim, I remember that first week was tough.
I think that 82, 83 team is probably the best team we had.
Yeah.
When you were out there, you always pretty confident when you're standing back there on defense that they were going to do the job for you up front. Getting the puck out of the zone and wasn't going to come back in once they got it, and then you'd have to go back in, and they're going to be able to get it up the ice.
All right, Tim Cullen, he was here for 7 years as head coach of the Otters. Started in the 82-83 season, went through 88-89. Winningest coach in Otter hockey history, percentage-wise. Over 70% of the games you coach were wins. So you had a great run there as the Otter coach. Just, if you could, just tell us how you wound up in Fergus Falls to begin with.
Well, it's a great story, and great people. I give the credit to the 70% thing. We had a really good youth hockey program in Fergus at the time, and a lot of dedicated people, dedicated parents, and the kids were just great. I just loved coaching these kids, and so anyway, I had stepped away from coaching. I had coached the high school team in Alexandria for 7-8 years, and then I officiated for a year, and I really liked it. And some of the parents actually approached me and said, "How'd you like to move to Alexandria or move to Fergus? How would you like to coach?" And blah blah blah. So anyway, long story short, we worked out the details, and I was able to get our district to go along with this setup where I was still teaching in Alexandria and coaching over here. And so it worked out well. I mean, it was a lot of driving, but it turned out to be a real blessing of a time in my life.
Well, it's quite a sacrifice to drive every day for practice after you've taught a full day, and some nights you're meeting the bus somewhere near Alexandria because you're heading on to St. Cloud or wherever for a hockey game. It turned out to be some long hours, but you have to have a passion when you're doing stuff like that.
And I think, Craig, that's the word, is passion. It's just like anything, whether your passion, you and your profession, in the number of hours. So yeah, if it isn't really a job and you really enjoy it, and you think you're adding value to kids and to life, it's like, in using that hockey platform, that's such a special place because kids just love their sports, whether it's football, basketball, hockey. And hockey players just love the sport, I think. And so that the significance of having that platform to reach kids for matters of significance, I thought we're cooking with gas then.
So who instilled that passion in you, Tim? Who were the guys that kind of really influenced you in deciding to become a hockey coach and a hockey player?
I grew up in International Falls, and so that was a part of life up there. It was a way of life. And then we went on and played college and played in the Green Bay Bobcats in the United States Hockey League for 3 years of semi-professional. And so I don't know. I had some good experiences, and we had some great friends and associates in the industry, and so it just became the norm. I mean, if I was going to be in teaching and I became a teacher, well, you have a lot of time when you're teaching, and so to coach seemed to be the logic. And so I coached some baseball and a little football, but hockey was the passion, and it always has been. And so just blessed that it's been such an integral part of our family. I'm not a coach that, if we had a whole bunch of really good defensemen, we were going to stack it up. It's like, I guess my philosophy in life, if we're not on the offense, we're on the defense. And so the logic of getting after it and being, obviously on your end you have to be responsible, and we all have important roles to play, but the significance of letting the kids play when we have the puck and getting after it. So no, we didn't change our philosophies, our forechecks that much. I know I probably love this statement in hockey more than any, that the over-coaching and under-teaching. And so if you said, well, what was your model? I was a teacher. I mean, how we pass and how we receive, that's the model. That's what we have in front of us. So the significance of improving our skills at a high rate of speed, that was so much of it.
When we grew up, I remember even going to games. I probably remember going to games in '75 probably, when I was about 9 years old. And they had a good, 75, 76. That's when they started to play well. I mean, they were starting to beat Thief River, and I mean, we were going to games out here. We'd go to most all the away games, and it was exciting. 77, they were good. Had a good team. I remember going to all those. I remember
some teams.
You remember all the players, Tim Lilliquist, and I mean all those guys that were on the team. You'd watch those guys and look up to them, and who else was all kinds of those guys. Tommy Beck. Then in 77, 78, they went to the section
Tom Beck,
final.
Bjorklund.
Yeah, Paul Bjork, Tommy Beck, and
Steve Lundin.
Yeah, Steve, and I mean they had a
Mark Ferber was a goalie.
Yeah, Titus Schroeder was out there, and but I remember going to all those games, and
we used to go to games like probably in kindergarten. His dad coached the Bantams, and couldn't. Well, I just remember my first recollection of we were probably in kindergarten. Like Jerry Newlive was out there. You remember his?
Oh yeah. This is 70.
70 when he had a mask. I remember. That's my first. We used to go in the games. It was it was packed out there in the old.
Used to have afternoon games a lot out there then in those years.
And
72.
We used to go to a lot of those too. But then, like kind of as Kris was saying, probably about 74, 75, we kind of first started to remember, and the teams were starting to get good.
Yeah.
Beating some teams. Thief River was down here, I think, the first time in 76.
Yeah, and they beat them.
It was a big game.
They never
here.
played Thief River before that, on some of these teams. So
they beat them down here, and then you had that 77, 78 team, which was real good.
And then our teams, we came along. We had a great Bantam team, and we
lost maybe 3 regular season games and 2. We were at the same
Bantam,
team,
and then Maha we lost to Duluth Sports Locker, but we had so we were coming up, and and by 81 and 82 we kind of knew who the guys were going to be on the team. All of us, Jason Wentler to Craig Hedstrom to Mike Donnelly, Baglow's in 9th grade. We all kind of moved up. Yeah.
Vic was a senior.
Vic was a senior.
Okay. Pretty good team. Dan Snewstead, Steinbach.
Yep. In 81, 82. I think we
Tom Mann.
We won the conference almost that year.
I think we did.
Yeah, we won we had a good year, and
it's just kind of typical at the end there.
We had a tough time against Bemidji in the end in the section up in Thief River.
Yeah. So the youth hockey program, when you were coming up, that's when it really started to build, and the numbers were growing.
Yes.
So talk about that experience and how that helped, get those teams prepared for the success.
It's kind of, I think about back when we were in kindergarten, and everybody played hockey.
Everybody played,
youth hockey.
They had a big house league program. This is before mites, so you had squirts, peewees, and bantams.
You had peewee house and bantam house.
You had a bantam house league, so you had everybody, and then you had the traveling teams. So it was you played house, but it was a really big deal.
Go to school and have beat guys, and you know what I mean. And it was competitive.
Everybody played. Everybody seemed like they played. Didn't matter. Then a lot of guys dropped out, but everybody.
It was a good youth program here.
And then it was a big deal to make the traveling team.
Sure.
It was really big. I mean, it was a big. Yeah.
Your dad was one of the guys that was involved with that, but there were a lot of adults, business people who really made an impact on youth hockey. Were there some guys individually that, obviously your dad had a big impact?
But there was, Gary Cranston was out
Jim
there.
Knapp.
Yep, Jim Knapp was out,
he was in charge of all the equipment, I remember.
There was a lot of guys. Bob Lilliquist was out there all the time, a lot of different guys.
I'm trying to think who else.
And then, Dennis Eckelberger was out there. Was a Bantam coach, Pee-wee coach.
Shagstead.
Lloyd was out there, and I'm trying
to think who else.
But it was
probably a pretty good board then.
Yeah, the board was real good. A lot of Otter Tail Power people on it, and so it was a good time. The traveling teams back then, in the early 70s, you should take buses all over. We didn't. By the time I got there, in the youth hockey, we didn't take Parents kind of drove mostly, but I remember when my dad coached the Bantams, 69, 70, 71, they took school buses. Squirts, Pee-wees, and Bantams would all go to International Falls on a bus.
Stay over and play.
Over in a hotel, and by the time I got there, they didn't do that anymore. By 75,
We always met at Otter Tail Power.
parking lot, and everybody would.
If someone needed a ride, you just pile in.
Everybody would pile into cars. Everybody had a ride.
Parents weren't going to go.
Some
They'd drop them off there, and
Yeah.
it was fun. It was fun.
It is satisfying, and I just trump that a little bit in so much as it's way more satisfying for me, and that's maybe just the way I'm wired, when I see a kid becoming a great young dad and a great young husband and a great young person. I mean, the satisfaction of, because we're only going to be shooting pucks for so many years in our life, and at the end of the day, so what have we helped instill in the kids, and what values are they taking with them? To go play Division I hockey or something is great, but it's really, the satisfaction for me comes as we see what kind of an individual they're developing into. And by the grace of God, lots of those kids have turned out to be really great young people. Well, I think the first assistant coach I had was Wayne Horgan, and we're both from International Falls, and he had been the head coach before, and I said, Horgy, because I always had the utmost respect for Wayne, and especially in the defensive zone. His responsibility piece was, and so we had a lot of fun and enjoyment those first couple of years that he coached, and then Brian Vatnsdal from Roseau. Philosophically, we aligned so nicely as far as how to play the game, and those friendships have been great. And it's a privilege to work with some of these young guys. Horgy was older than me, by the way. Let's clean that up. But for Brian to be able to work with us and have some success, and then he went on and was a head coach for a while, and it's a great experience and a lot of fun.
Brian Vatnsdal succeeded his mentor behind the Otter bench and talked about how valuable his years as an assistant coach were in preparing him for the role of head coach.
It was very valuable. I had the opportunity to work with Terry Shercliffe. He was the head coach in Moorhead at that time for 1 year. And during the year I met Tim, and I had known Terry, his brother. He was in Roseau as a JV coach when I was a senior. He was just there 1 year. So I got to know him pretty well, and I got to know Tim then through that year when we played him a couple times. And he said they would be looking for an assistant at down in Fergus the next year, and asked if I would be interested, and I said yes, I would be. And I knew and remember coming down and playing in the Pee Wee tournaments and all these different games in youth hockey here in Fergus, and they always had such a good quality program, and I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to work alongside Tim for it was 6 years, I guess, before he left, and he was a awesome mentor and just a great friend, and we had a lot of very good experiences through those years.
And some very good teams. I think 6 of Tim's 7 years were winning records. He's got the best winning percentage of any coach, and you were part of some really good years there. And I'm sure it kind of whet your appetite for head coaching too. But when you took over, when Tim left, you were a pretty young guy. You had a great first year, great start to your coaching career. But looking back on that, how difficult was that transition?
I felt that at the time, I was ready to move into that role. It was a lot of stuff that I shouldn't say stuff, but a lot of things that you aren't aware of or as much when you're an assistant. But I was blessed with a lot of very talented players at that time that moved in when they were seniors, and the whole group actually. And we had a real good first year, I felt. Disappointing at the end, like always, when you lose your final game. But we had a lot of very good players, and it was a very enjoyable year. Well, I tell you, one of the things that really helped me getting mentored with Terry Shercliffe and Tim was just how to handle your staff, in a sense. And I was very appreciative of all those years, and the guys that I had working with me at that time and through all the years that I was coaching. You're only as good as your help, in a sense. And I was very comfortable and felt really great about who we had with us. Larry Goose came in, and after my first year, there was Jeff Hansen, if you remember him. He was helped me out my first year, and then Larry came in after that. He had been coaching up in Fargo South, and he came down, interviewed for a teaching job here, and we got him as an assistant, which I felt very, very fortunate to have. And I've known Larry basically his whole life, because he grew up in Roseau too, and I graduated with his brother from high school, and I knew his family, and so I was very blessed in that regard to have a guy like that was alongside me going through those years. We had a lot of different guys that came in and out that helped with the junior varsity too. Of course, Raj was there all those years, and he's continued to be a part of the program, big part of the program for prior to me and now many years after. Al Fazio helped one year. Scott Bierke was helping. We had a lot of very good help, and not only through the high school, but all the stuff we did helped in the youth program too, and all those things. I just was very blessed to have the people around me that they are good quality people.
Ben Schierer was MVP 2 years in a row and was a solid netminder for Vatnsdal's teams. Ben remembers some very competitive games.
Yeah, well, my senior year, my senior year was the year that Moorhead first went to the state tournament, and then they started their domination. And we played 2 one-goal games with them during that. We were all grown up through Pee-wees, Squirts, Pee-wees, Bantams, into high school. We were really played that team tough in Moorhead, but we never quite were able to beat them. We beat them handily as my junior year, and then their senior year, they had some of those players that would go on, and the Jason Blakes and the Cullen and the Crafts and those names that are familiar now. But yeah, my senior year, Moorhead had our number, unfortunately, but that was the team that we wanted to beat, and we just weren't able to do that. We lost that last high school game I played. We lost in the semis to Moorhead.
As far as the people playing in front of you, your defensemen and your forwards, you're some pretty good hockey players, some names that Otter fans will certainly recognize.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Greg, you just talked to Greg, and what a player he was. Fun to watch. Dave Thacker was a year younger than he was a good fast player. Chad Welly was a captain. Chad Welly and Pete Lindblom were the captains when I was a junior. They were great players. And then, of course, you had Chad Thompson and Chris Mell and Dion Wells and Mike Athens, all those guys that were a few years older than me, that we looked up to, and I played with as a freshman and a sophomore. That just really made you better. So yeah, some really great hockey players and great hockey families and great hockey tradition, and of course, you'd see Raj Johnson as the coach, and you're just like to get to play with Raj out in the old satellite. Those players who never got to play with Raj when it was 20 below zero out in the old satellite, when everyone had a sock on their head and we were playing for Frosties, they missed out on one of the great traditions in Otter hockey history. I'll tell you that.
Another great tradition is watching Slapshot, right? In Rogers class. Did you ever see Slapshot?
We did. We watched Slapshot, and Youngblood was just coming out, I think, when I was. So we'd watch that as well. But yeah, so glad to have those memories of playing Otter hockey and having. There's some different varsity coaches that were coming and going throughout my career, but there was one mainstay, and there has been a mainstay in Otter hockey history, and that's Raj. And I'm so fortunate that I was able to play for Raj. Yeah, that's one of the that is the highlight of my hockey career, that's for sure.
I mean, we were very fortunate to have, with our goaltending, we had Chris Mell, Brian Berg, we had Chris Horgan and Ben, and all these goaltenders that did very, very well through their years. Ben LaPlante was there at that time, and but yeah, you only go so far as your goaltending, which was evident of the state high school tournament again this year. You got to have good goaltending to excel, and we were always pretty blessed with that for many of those years that I was the head coach.
My family moved to Minnesota in 1980, and of course, I assume that the U.S. Olympic hockey team had something to do with it. I remember the cover of the Fergus Falls phone book back in 1980 had the Olympic team on it, and so my parents coming from Illinois, and some of the neighborhood kids played hockey, and my dad got me into hockey, and I was on Dick Warner's team, of course. Dick Werner was my coach, and I played forward my first year, and I wanted to play goalie my second year. My mom and dad supported that, and it was my second year of Squirts. I started playing goalie, and ever since then it just stuck, and I stayed with it, and I really enjoyed it actually.
So talk about your style. What made you a good goalie? What was your strength?
Well, I think that any success I had, I think I played a little different than most goalies. I was a stand-up, and I skated a lot. So the thing I think that made me a good goalie, if I was a good goalie, was my parents. We lived near Cleveland. I skated out every single day. I played the game of hockey. I knew the game of hockey really, really well. And I think that most people who have success, they can see the game, they understand the game, they know where the puck's going to go. And I think that was, I could skate as well as anybody on the ice, and I don't think that's always the case for goalies. And so, I enjoyed playing forward, pick up hockey as much as anybody. So I think that's maybe what gave me a little bit of an advantage in goal.
Vatnsdal also had one of the greatest scorers the Otters have ever had in Greg Buckmeier.
Yeah, that was really a fun year. Greg, he really had an knack for the net, and he could really score goals. He was definitely our go-to guy during his time, and it was just fun.
Yeah, so it rotated a few like my sophomore year, I think I was with Peter Lindblom, who was a senior at the time, one of the co-captains, and Kris Werner, I believe, that my sophomore year. And then my junior year, Peter graduated, of course, and then it was Kris Werner and Fritz Karsnia. So Fritz would have been a year behind me, so he would have been a sophomore at the time. We had a pretty good year. And then my senior year, trying to change it up a little bit, I continued to skate with Kris Werner, and then Eric Ecker, who was a sophomore at the time too, a good golfer for Fergus. So a few different people, some consistency. I think I skated with Kris probably all 3 years. But yeah, it kind of mixed it up, and we had a number of talented players, so we tried to get a couple good lines going. Like my sophomore and junior year, we had players like Brady Fredrickson, David Olson, Doug Schrock up at the forward line, so we were able to have kind of a 1-2 punch in a lot of games. And then for my senior year, we have Dave Thacker, and then Fritz went and played with Dave, I think, for a lot of that year. So it gave us kind of a 1-2 punch instead of being all focused on one line.
So those people that haven't seen you play or have just heard stories about when you played, how would you describe your style of play? What kind of a hockey player would you say you were?
I don't know. I guess kind of a mixture of skill and size. I was more probably, I don't want to say a grinder, but more of a power forward. I worked pretty hard in the off season in terms of I was pretty strong and a pretty big player, so I wasn't afraid to go to the dirty areas and score goals, but I also was able to get some on line rushes and different things like that, one-on-one type of opportunities. So it's kind of a good mixture of both size and kind of skill.
You were playing in an era in Minnesota hockey where things were changing as far as class systems and how tournaments were set up, state tournaments were set up. What do you remember about that time period as far as the changes there and the toughest opponents that the Otters had to go up against?
Sure, yeah. So the changes really were how the playoff structure was set. It was my sophomore year was we were still in the single class system. So there were 8 sections, and whether you were the smallest school that had a hockey program or you were the largest school that had a hockey program, you all played together. And I remember I think my sophomore year, Roseau was still in the state championship. So talk about like a Roseau versus Bloomington Jefferson. You're talking one of your large schools versus probably one of your smaller schools. Then my junior year, Minnesota State High School League started to dabble with maybe how do we get more spotlight on some of the smaller programs. And they tried a few different things. I think my junior year, they tried what they called a Tier 2 state tournament. And so what they did there is kind of like today, where they have a seeding system where they rank all the teams within the section. But it was the top 8 teams were in Tier 1, and then anyone that was 9 or below, they kind of went into this Tier 2 tournament. And then if you won that tier, then you were also able to go down to the Civic Center with the clear glass and play in the state tournament. So it was kind of a joke in terms of the state champion of the tier tournament was the 65th best team in the state, just based on the seedings. But I remember it was Alexandria at the time you almost have to wonder. I want to say we were like the 4 seed, so we weren't really close. But when you get down to the end of the season and you're going to be number 8 in the Tier 1 tournament and have to play the number 1 seed in the section and probably get run out of the barn versus being the 9 seed and have a chance to go down to St. Paul and play in the Civic Center, you maybe want to tank a game or two to make sure you solidify that 9 seed. But I don't know if that gamesmanship was going on or not. But that really only lasted maybe 1 or 2 seasons. And then I think shortly after I graduated, then they kind of settled in on, more like all the other traditional sports where it's based on enrollment, but they still have, the flavor of it where you can opt up, right? Roseau's not a size of a AA school. Roseau versus Moorhead is not, it's kind of a David and Goliath type of things, but Roseau's got the tradition and the folks up there wanted to stay AA and stay competitive, so they just continue to opt up along with a couple other schools. But so it's nice they still have that ability with those smaller, Roseau, War Road, Iron Range schools that want to stay, keep that tradition alive and kind of pound their chest and say we can still compete with some of the best teams in the state.
In those years, playing in the Region 8 tournament for the opportunity to get to state was like playing in a mini state tournament.
Everybody knows the legends in Region 8. Warroad and Roseau and Thief River. They were like second-generation players where their dads had played, whereas sometimes the first-generation player whose parents had maybe played other sports like basketball, hockey was, a new game for them. And I never could figure out, in basketball, when the coach is yelling at the refs, he's working the refs. In hockey, if a hockey coach yells at the refs, he's trying to start a riot. And the same thing in basketball. There's a good foul in basketball, right?
Yeah.
Is there a good foul in hockey? No. Everybody in hockey says, what are you trying to do? Put them in the hospital? So there's a different mindset. And those second generation families, I think, talking about hockey at the dinner table and 24/7, they kind of had the advantage, and we look forward to the challenge to taking on those guys because we wanted to prove that we belonged with them.
You got Bemidji and Roseau and Warroad and Thief River, and it was there were some. I was just driving in, going by the arena, and I remember. It was a Saturday, and I was sicker than a dog, and I'm like, we were playing Roseau that night, and we were good, and you play like you practice, and we were becoming a good hockey team. And so I called my buddy, and I said, hey, you mind driving me over to Fergus, because I just was really not feeling good. And to be quite frank, I didn't want to miss that opportunity, because when you're so prepared and you're so ready, and so we started the third period in running time, and those little memories, they're just fun, and I just felt really good for our kids because we put a lot of effort into it, and the kids were committed to the game and to the sport and to the team. And so there's a lot of good memories.
It was the old Section 8, and so when I was at Pee-wees, Squirts, Pee-wees, and Bantams, you had those great Otter teams of Jeff Mell and Blaine Rude playing against the Bemidjis. And you had the Warroads and the Roseaus going down to the state tournament every year, and we were playing with those teams. We were in those games, in those sections, and great tournaments. The Section 8 tournament. You'd alternate, if you remember. You'd go to between East Grand Forks and Thief River Falls, and boy, that's something that you looked forward to all year long. But some great Otter teams that I looked up to, and so then to get to be an Otter, to put on the maroon and gold and go out there and play against the Bemidjis and the Warroads and the Roseaus, Thief Rivers, it was a great tradition, and it was something that I think it is different now. I mean, you take what you get. These kids, they play in the section that they're put in, but there was something really special about the old Section 8, the old Mariucci Conference back in the day.
Roger Johnson has been a mainstay in the Fergus Falls hockey program since the mid-1960s, and it seems that everybody has a Rog story.
Roger, he was indispensable to the Fergus program. I mean, boy, he would, he took all the stats and he wrote up all the articles, and if you wanted a question about Fergus hockey, Roger, he knew where all the bodies were buried, He was invaluable to me. Yeah. I guess one thing I would say to Mr. Johnson, though, he might come to me and say, "Coach, we're not very good at this," or "Coach, we're not very good at this." And I said, "Okay, Roger, I realize we're not very good at that. Now give me a drill to fix it." So we got along real good, and he was a prince of a guy, and he was a social studies teacher anyways, and that was my major too. I was a social studies teacher, so we got along real good.
I remember when I first started playing hockey in like second, third grade, Roger was coaching the high school then, and when they were at Channing Rink, outdoor hockey, and Roger was in gray sweats, I remember, and practice wasn't going well, and he was having a hard time with the players, and he was skating them hard at the end. But pitchers and Rog, oh yeah, he was great. Going through high school, especially my sophomore year with Wayne Horrigan, he was always around cheering everybody up, and all the way through. I think Rog has been a great personality to have around Fergus.
Several players from this era under Coach Colpitts and Coach Cullen and Coach Vatnsdal went on to play some high-level college hockey with a lot of success.
My brother is 2 years older than me and obviously played through the program here. So he went down there initially 2 years prior. And then, I don't know, third of the way, half the way through my senior year, Wally Acker, Vic, was the head coach at that time. He's since passed. But started talking to Dan Snewstead and I about going down to play at Eau Claire after high school. And had some other, we were talking before started filming that Bill Colpitts had, thrown some flyers out for me with some Division I programs, and things, I guess, didn't really come to fruition and would allow me to, financially really be able to swing something like that. Plus, there was a big push, pull, family-wise and familiarity-wise. I'd watch some of my brother's games and go to St. Cloud or and watch him play down in the cities a couple times, and having Wally, calling and checking in and hey, and had some people that he knew from Moorhead come down and watch some of our games, or when we played up in Moorhead, watch some of the games and kind of give them a report on how the team was doing and how we were doing, and so just ended up going down to Eau Claire. Dan Snewstead, who was a defenseman, captain my senior year, eventually went down there. So there was three of us my freshman year. So it was me and my brother, Tim, and Dan Snewstead. And then the year after that, our sophomore year, Vic Evavold came, another teammate of ours, who was an alternate captain our senior year. And so there was four of us, and that year we won a national championship. As a matter of fact, we just had I'm glad I'm sitting down when I say this, our 40th anniversary of doing that. So they had a bunch of us back this year. It was very cool. There was, and I think there was 18 of us that came back. We've had a couple teammates that have passed, and a couple people couldn't make it, family issues and the like. But we had like 18 people there, and so they had a very space similar to this at the arena in Eau Claire at their Blue Line Club, and got there and had some food and went to Ray's Tavern, which was a little kitty corner right across the street from the hockey arena, and met down there. So yeah, we won a national championship with 4 Fergus Falls ex-Otter hockey players on it. So it was kind of fun to run down the roster and Fergus Falls, Fergus Falls, Fergus Falls, Fergus Falls. So it's very cool.
Yeah, I always wanted to go play Division I hockey. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
When did that start becoming a real thing?
Yeah, probably 84, 85 there. I went out and played at Boston University and And
I played out there just a year, and I couldn't cut the line up, so.
but yeah, I went out and
It was a good experience. I'm glad. I wish I would have been able to stick around. Maybe I could have dressed or something. But I got to be part of BU hockey for that long at least. Got to practice, and
Sure.
that was a step up.
Yeah.
You know, a little more.
yeah,
Go to school and then have a hard, intense hockey practice compared, real competitive compared to high school. I guess it
Right.
was, but everybody was just as good or better than you out there. So
older.
Right.
I was 21 years old most of my senior year. Now you got guys out there 24 and 25 years old, 22, 23.
usually they're a freshman at 21. aren't
Yes,
they,
a lot of them now. They
Not all of them, but
then now it's the transfer portal and all that stuff. So it's really gotten, but yeah. So I went out there and played for 3 years, and yeah, I didn't play when I was a freshman. Practiced with the team, and then yeah.
How good were they at
We
that time?
were pretty good. We went to the playoffs, NCAA play. We lost to Minnesota, lost to the Gophers.
From a junior hockey perspective, for a number of years in the 80s, we had, I think, the way the rights worked, the teams in the 80s, we had a number of players that went down and played for the North Iowa Huskies. You think like the Jason Wentlers, the Myron Russell, some of those types of guys. At that time, teams could take towns and say, we get all the players coming out of this town. At that time, we did not have that when I graduated. So I was drafted to go to the Rochester Mustangs and go play down there. So went through the process, and I played down there for 2 years. Great experience. Got to play with a number of guys I played with in high school. I played with Jason Goulet from War Road, Ryan Hacker from Alexandria. So it wasn't complete strangers that I played with, but it was a good experience. At that time, it was probably, who was going Division I, it was probably 50% out of juniors, 50% straight out of high school. Now it's almost 100% out of juniors in terms of before you're going to go play Division I hockey. So that landscape has changed a little bit. But it was a good experience. Got to focus on hockey, be a couple more years mature. And at the time, I didn't have really any Division I offers when I graduated high school, and that was one of my goals. So juniors worked out. I had some pretty good academic and test scores, so I was able to get into West Point. If you look at the West Point roster now, they have a lot of junior players. I think I was the first that took, post-grad and played a couple of years of hockey before I went there. I remember having conversations with the coach, like, we're really fighting for you, but if we get you, if we're fighting for you, but we want to make sure that you're going to come if we get you in. Because when they went to the academic board, it's a rigorous process to get in there, they like, how serious does this kid take his academics if he's willing to take 2 years off? So fortunately, I was able to get through there, and then I just, it was an adjustment going back to school and then going back to school in an academic environment like West Point. But yeah, ended up being consistently on the honor roll and graduating in the top half of my class there, which is pretty impressive when you think about everyone there is in the top 10% of their high school before they come. But yeah, so it was a good experience. I would say West Point, we always said the best part of our day was hockey practice, right? Because it was, especially when you were an underclassman, because there's definitely freshmen and sophomores are treated differently than juniors and seniors. So that was kind of our getaway, to get away from some of the hazing or some of the different duties and things that the freshmen had to do in terms of delivering mail, delivering laundry, all of those types of things. So it was nice. Our upperclassmen teammates we were teammates. We weren't necessarily in that same pecking order. Plus, you go to away games, you get to stay at a Marriott, and you get to actually watch TV, which you didn't get to do when you were in your barracks room. So all of that was a positive, and really enjoyed my college years of hockey.
Following Vatnsdal's tenure and 2 years under Tim Berglund, the Otters would then enter the most successful stretch of the history of Otter boys hockey, as state tournaments became the norm under head coach Brad Bergstrom. We'll explore the Berglund and Bergstrom and Mike Donahue eras on part 3 of our Otter Hockey History podcast. Be watching for it.